77% of households carry debt. But why do people not talk about it? Why does it still feel like a personal failure? That uncomfortable feeling is not about math. That is what we call debt shame. And today, we're going to talk about what it is, how common it really is, and why the data tells a very different story than what we think. Welcome back to Stickman Money, where I break down personal finance to help you build your rich life. And please do me a favor for my new channel by liking and subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. All right, let's get into it. Debt shame is quiet, widespread, and misunderstood. Most people think stressing over debt is about money, but the data says it's really about silence. According to surveys, 73% of Americans say money is their number one source of stress. But fewer than 40% feel comfortable talking about money problems, even with close friends. That's a huge gap, and that gap matters, because when something affects almost everyone, but almost no one talks about it, shame fills the vacuum. Debt shame isn't just, I wish I owed less. It's the belief that your debt says something about who you are, that you failed, that you're irresponsible, that you should have known better. And unlike healthy financial concern, which pushes you to act, shame freezes you so that you're paralyzed from doing something about it. A recent 2023 study found that people experiencing high financial shame were 2.5 times more likely to avoid opening bills or checking balances. Not because they don't care, but because looking feels unbearable. And that's where things quietly spiral. So let's talk about what the data says and why it is so hard for people to look at their debt. Debt is normal. The shame is the outlier. Let's ground this in reality. According to the Federal Reserve, 77% of American households carry debt. This isn't some statistical outlier. This is actually the default. In other words, a large majority, or 3 out of 4 American households, carry debt. Average numbers for each household look like this. Credit cards, about $8,000. Student loans, nearly $39,000. Auto loans, around $24,000. Mortgages, over $240,000. Yet despite debt being statistically normal, 42% of people with debt report significant shame about it. Does that sound like you? And here's the part that surprises people. Debt shame increases with age. Older generations report more shame than younger ones, possibly because younger people see more open conversations online. But for many adults, money was never something they talked about. You just handled it. Or maybe older generations report more shame than younger ones because the implication is that they had more time to handle it. So why does debt hit us so emotionally? There are 3 main reasons. First, we moralize money. We're taught that success equals discipline, and discipline equals worth. So debt doesn't feel like a financial issue. It feels like a character flaw. Second, social comparison. On social media, you see vacations, new homes, upgrades. What you don't see are the debt payments behind them. Studies show 68% of people admit they've posted about purchases they couldn't comfortably afford just to keep up appearances. You're comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reels and assuming you're the only one struggling. That's not a fair comparison. And third, financial education gaps. Only 57% of American adults are considered financially literate. Most people were never taught how debt works in a practical way. But instead of recognizing an education gap, shame convinces people they're bad with money. That emotional weight adds up. People with serious debt are 3 times more likely to have considered suicide. Nearly half say debt hurts their mental health. More than half say it damages relationships, not because of the numbers alone, but because of the isolation. So let's talk about how to break the cycle. What actually helps, according to the data? There is good news in all of this. Debt shame is actually learned, and that means it can be unlearned. The first step is naming it. Once you realize shame is part of the problem, not proof of failure, it loses power. Second, normalize the conversation, selectively. You don't need to tell everyone everything, but research shows that people who talk openly about money with even one trusted person report lower stress and more follow-through action. One conversation can change the whole emotional load. I would highly encourage having an open and vulnerable conversation with a trusted friend or family member. That is the first big step towards breaking the cycle. Third, separate identity from numbers. Debt is a financial tool that did not work as expected. It is not a moral verdict. You wouldn't define yourself by a broken appliance or a bad spreadsheet. Debt deserves the same neutrality. Fourth, focus on direction, not position. Progress matters more than totals. Even small efforts like paying down $100, spending $50 less, or opening the bill to face the debt instead of avoiding it are major steps in the right direction. Those actions compound faster than shame. And finally, get support. People who work with nonprofit credit counselors pay off debt up to 40% faster on average. Not because they're smarter, but because they're supported. Asking for help isn't failure, it's strategy. Summary: get started. Now that you know that a large majority of your peers have debt, and that debt shaming is not productive, you can get started immediately in breaking that cycle. Remember that debt shame survives in silence. Debt shame tells you that you're alone, behind, and broken. But the data says something different. Because debt is common, the struggle is actually normal, and shame is the least useful emotion to deal with it. Your debt does not define you. What matters is the moment you stop hiding from it and you take your first steps towards tackling it. And that moment is where progress actually starts. I hope this video helps you make a step towards facing your emotional reaction towards debt and taking your first step to overcome it. If it did, please drop me a like and comment below if you didn't know so many others had debt and felt the same way too. And if you liked this video, here are 2 other videos you might like on poor money habits and debt.